Perfect.
And you want me to record it to the cloud?
I got it actually, and I'll go ahead and it'll just record right to me, and then I will do all of the things to get it on the website.
Great, awesome. Welcome everybody. We are so excited to have you all here today with Robyn Gobbel. We are the Foster Kent Kids Coalition, so we are made up of representatives from all 5 private agencies in Grand Rapids. My name is Jessica Nestor. I work for Catholic Charities, and I will be your host today. So if you can please, as you are signing in, please post your name and email. So the name of whoever is watching from your computer. I know sometimes there might be multiple partners watching from one computer. If you'll put both of your names and your email in the chat to make sure that we can get you the certification after the training. So I'll just give it a moment as people continue to log on. And afterwards, if you have not already, please visit our website at fosterkentkids.care. We will have, if you have any friends that were unable to attend this training, we're actually going to have all recorded trainings on our website so that you can access them for a limited amount of time after the training and access that information, because it's going to be some great stuff that we are covering here today. And if you do have any questions, you can email fosterkentkids@wmpc.care. So thank you so much for attending today. Again, my name is Jessica Nestor. I will be watching the chat and looking at questions. So if you do post questions as we go along, we won't be able to answer all questions in the moment as we have a lot of content to cover, but we do want to make sure we get your questions answered. So I'll be compiling those so that we have them to address with the remaining time at the end. All right, so thank you all so much. And here today, I'm just going to introduce Robyn. After founding and growing the Central Texas Attachment and Trauma Center, Robyn and her family followed their own path for a more playful life and relocated to Grand Rapids. Robyn is writing, teaching, and training clinicians and parents, helping them translate complex neuroscience into how they show up for their clients and families. And she does this through trainings, through workshops, as well as in a weekly blog and podcast. So if you haven't checked those out, definitely look up Robyn and check out all of her lovely podcasts and Facebook page. All right, so without further ado, I will pass it to Robyn.
Wonderful. You guys are hearing me? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I've had just a little bit of tech challenges that are unusual. So if anything ever happens, Jessica, if we should definitely just unmute yourself and say like, hey, we're not getting you anymore. So thank you for Foster Kent Kids for inviting me. It's especially exciting and a really huge honor to have the opportunity to connect with folks here in my local community that I've not really had tons of opportunity to do since moving. The pandemic didn't start too terribly long after we relocated. And so I just haven't gotten out. I literally haven't gotten out. And so I'm just really grateful to be here with connecting and impacting my local community, especially, but then I also know that there's people here from all over. So thank you for making this opportunity available for everybody who wanted to join. All right, let me get my screen. Let's see if screen sharing works correctly. All right, how does that look? Is everybody seeing just the slide? Like not my presenter notes, but just the slide? That's fantastic. Okay, we're doing good. We're doing good. All right, and now let's see if I can get my clicker to work. Perfect. All right, you guys, I think we're gonna make it. We're gonna make it. So we're here today talking about lying, specifically as looking at it through the lens of a trauma-driven behavior. Certainly not all lying is trauma-driven, but specifically today we're going to look at as something that is driven by trauma. And then based on that information, how can we create an experience and an environment for our kids that will increase their safety and decrease what can feel like it's such a stressful behavior. So like I was introduced as, I've relocated here to outside Grand Rapids, Michigan, in the summer of 2019. After working in Austin, Texas, and had, I was an outpatient psychotherapist and pretty exclusively worked with kids with a history of trauma. Almost all of the kids that I worked with were adopted, either from foster care internationally, or sometimes kids adopted at birth. So I have a unique area of specialization that kind of brings all those pieces together: trauma and attachment and adoption. And then when we relocated, I made what I thought was going to be a sort of a temporary decision to pause seeing clients just as we adjusted and landed in our new home. And then COVID happened, and our best laid plans, right, with COVID. So I'm still teaching and training and working as hard as possible to just impact as many families, parents, caregivers, therapists, caseworkers, everybody out there, to see how some of these most troubling behaviors, and lying is one of the behaviors that I just come up against repeatedly. It's so stressful to caregivers. It's so stressful to parents. It's just so stressful to the adults. And it is a behavior that seems to really linger. And so it's stressful for a long time. So the concepts that we talk about today that are underneath the framework we're going to look at specifically with regards to lying can be applied to probably every behavior that we come across in our kids. We're just going to look really closely at the behavior of lying today. And as we go on, I'm going to be offering up like other places and other resources where you can go get more information on other things, should you want to, should your interest be piqued. So what we're going to talk about today is what behaviors aren't. And then we are going to look at a concept a metaphor I came up with years and years and years ago. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I actually don't love this metaphor anymore, but everyone else loves it. So I just keep going with it. The idea of the trauma tornado. And then we'll look through the idea, we'll define what the trauma tornado is, look at how we as the adults in the situation can jump out of it when possible, and then lying specifically through this lens. And then of course, we're going to spend some time looking at very clear examples and scripts. Which is the part I know that you really, really, really want. And there's a lot of words on some slides, and I did that on purpose so that you would have like all these scripts when we're done today. And also it sounds like you'll even be able to go back and watch the recording when you want to. So that's cool. Okay, so before we go any further, I just want to lead with what really has become my mantra. And I know some of you probably may already know this about me. If you follow me, you've seen me other places. And something I say over and over and over again is that regulated, connected kids who feel safe and of course know what to do, they do well, they're behaving well, they're behaving in pro-social ways, they're behaving in ways that aren't driving us to spend a beautiful afternoon in online learning because we don't need online learning to tackle our kids' easy behaviors, right? We need that to tackle our kids' hard behaviors. And when kids are regulated, when they're connected, when feeling safe, they have behaviors that aren't compelling us to spend a gorgeous Wednesday afternoon in online learning. So that means lying, then, if we go about this backwards, I'm going to put lying in this category of something's going on with this child, either with their regulation, either with their connection, or either with their felt safety. So we'll talk probably mostly about the concept of felt safety and their protected, what I'm going to call their protected brain today. But when we're done, if you're really interested in these concepts of regulation, connection, and felt safety, I'm going to show you where you can go and get some free information on how to learn a little bit more about that. But when I stay anchored in this mantra, regulated, connected kids who feel safe do well, and this kid's behavior is not what I would call, quote unquote, doing well, that allows me to stay in a place of curiosity. That allows me to be like, I wonder what's up with that. And when I can stay in a place of curiosity, then the chances that I'm going to be able to address this behavior in a way that's actually helpful long-term increases dramatically, so dramatically. So regulated, connected kids who feel safe do well. This kid's not doing well. So I wonder what's up with that. Let's look for a second at what I believe so strongly behaviors in our kids are not. Behaviors in our kids are not character flaws. And it's really easy when we get dysregulated for us to start making sweeping kind of characterological generalizations about our kids, especially something like lying. And we start to use words like, my kid is a liar. And so we want to just notice our language and think about just staying focused on the behavior, not on sweeping character judgments, because behaviors aren't character flaws. They aren't who our kids are. They don't make up the totality of who our kids are. They aren't intentionally designed to make us angry or be manipulative. And if they are, because I've worked with enough kids with histories of complex trauma to know that actually sometimes that is the point of a behavior. Like a behavior sometimes really is intended to trigger us, to make us angry, to quote unquote push our buttons, to be manipulative. But that's not the end of the questioning. The next question still is, but why? Why would a kid use manipulation? Why would a kid do something on purpose to make me mad? Kids need adults to keep them alive. So if kids are behaving in a way that's intentionally making us mad, pushing us away, pushing our buttons, we still need to stay regulated enough to go, interesting, but why? I wonder what's up with that, and stay as curious about it as possible. And then of course, behaviors are not in any way, shape, or form a reflection of us as parents. Sometimes behaviors are a reflection of, again, the child's connection to us, their regulation, the felt safety in which we do have opportunities to contribute to. But who we are as people, who we are as adults, who we are as parents, our kids' behaviors don't define that. And if we can come to a place, when I started to kind of be able to come to a place to recognize that in my own kids' behaviors, again, that was just one more piece that allowed me to stay a little bit more regulated, that I didn't have to take his behaviors personally and make them mean anything about me. And then of course, some behaviors are actually relatively developmentally appropriate and normal, and lying can be very developmentally appropriate and normal. Lying is a thing humans do. So we're going to look a little bit more at that too, and learn why we might consider trying to distinguish, and if that's helpful, and some things we could take in mind and take into consideration that could even help us consider that. So I said we're going to look at this metaphor of a trauma tornado. So I wrote a blog, I don't even know how long ago at this point, maybe pushing 10 years, 8 years, a long time ago. And people loved this idea, the sense that like there is this chaos that swirls around. And that is absolutely true. Like living with people who have been experienced trauma causes this level of chaos and confusion of our own nervous systems. And when we live in close quarters, or we spend a lot of time with somebody, maybe because we're a teacher or their therapist or their caseworker, or somebody who's experienced a ton of trauma, we start to really, really feel the swirling, confusing chaos. Right? To the point where I'm assuming every person in the audience, if you have personal contact with somebody who has a history of trauma, you already even know what I mean by this. Like, you don't need me to define trauma tornado. You're like, oh yeah, I know that feeling. I know that chaos. I know that confusion. I know that overwhelm. I know that feeling of like, this is never going to stop, and how it just totally can sometimes feel like it takes over everything. And sometimes it comes out looking like this, right? Like sometimes this tornado of chaos looks like screaming, out of control, terrified child. And sometimes it comes out looking more like this, like angry, loud, like you feel scared child, right? And sometimes it can come out looking like this total blank shutdown. That has a little different quality to the chaos. But if we lean into the felt sense of this shutdown, we can get a little flavor for the chaos that's underneath this level of shutdown and collapse too. But then this tornado, this chaos, this overwhelm, it doesn't have to look like big, huge, out of control behaviors. And oftentimes lying doesn't. Oftentimes lying isn't accompanied with huge, out of control, screaming, yelling, violence. I mean, sometimes it is, but most parents tell me that actually it's easier to see behaviors as trauma driven when they're accompanied by really out of control behavior. It's harder to hold on to the truth that, oh, this behavior is trauma driven when it doesn't have that out of control flavor, when maybe it actually looks like a kid who's being extra cute or extra charming, right? Or it's like clingy behavior. Or it's again, this like blow off, like this, a little bit checked out, but just kind of blow off eye rolly behavior, right? Like the tornado feeling doesn't have to be out of control. It can be a little bit smaller behaviors. But for sure, all of those behaviors have one really clear thing in common, and it's what they aren't. And none of those behaviors from those previous slides are not kids coming to us with very clear communication, telling us exactly what's wrong, right? They're not using their words and saying, I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling unsafe, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling confused, I need your help, right? Instead, a behavior is coming to us. And it's underneath that behavior that we need to really get good at listening. What is this behavior communicating? That if my child had the words to tell me, I'm lonely, I'm unsafe, I'm scared, I'm confused, I need help regulating, even though I don't know why I feel this way. If our kids could use those words, they absolutely would, but they can't. So we have to get really good. I talk about putting our X-ray vision goggles on and looking underneath the behavior to see like what's going on that's driving this behavior. There has to be something, because regulated, connected kids do feel safe, do well. So there has to be something that's underneath this behavior. And actually, believe it or not, we can get to the point where we teach our kids to truly use their words to say what's going on, but that definitely takes a long time. Okay, so how does this tornado begin? There's a lot of ways. This is just a really small piece of how the tornado could be set in motion. Pre-birth experiences, in utero experiences of violence in the environment, in utero experience of loss in the environment. Fear, substance exposure. So all sorts of pre-birth experiences begin to kind of set the thermostat in a way for a child's experience with regulation, connection, and felt safety. And then that can impact and really increase the vulnerability that this feeling of the tornado could emerge. A traumatic birth, including adoption at birth, infant loss and separation at birth is a traumatic experience that could set this tornado into motion. Toxic stress, like our adverse childhood experiences. So on the next bullet point there, those are a lot of the adverse childhood experiences that are identified. Substance abuse, having a parent raised with who has a mental illness, instability or frequent changes in caregivers, exposure to domestic violence, orphanage care, out of home care, anything that's going to significantly impact or sort of send off the pathway of kind of typical attachment development. So for kids who have those types of early life experiences, instead of safety and security, those kids are experiencing chaos and confusion in their early days and months and years, right? So life wasn't as predictable, and therefore they didn't develop very organized and predictable ways of dealing with things that are hard. And that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, with the behaviors that can emerge from kids who have experiences of trauma, because the behaviors don't feel very predictable. You don't feel like okay, I've got a tool in my toolbox to handle X behavior, and I know that it works most of the time, right? Because it can feel so unpredictable. It's like, well, sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't. And I'm not really even sure what's going to happen next. Like we can start to feel this whiplashed feeling of chaos and confusion ourselves. And then of course we do want to pause and consider sometimes, is this behavior trauma driven or is it just normal kid behavior? I have absolutely had the experience, and it makes perfect sense that parents of kids with histories of trauma who are regularly, navigating chaos and confusion and overwhelm and dangerous behaviors, and maybe even feeling, afraid themselves, experiencing trauma themselves, is our stress resilient system gets really, really, really sensitized to. And so normal, kind of typical kid behavior, because kids aren't supposed to be behaving perfectly all the time. That's how they learn about themselves and they learn about the world, is sometimes they, mess up or they break the rules or they break boundaries. And then we see what happens. And some of this is just very normal kid behavior, because our stress resilience system has been so impacted that then we can sometimes make a mountain out of a molehill, like normal kid behavior, and we're reacting to it with like really big response. So it is important to remember that all kids demonstrate challenging behaviors: lying, stealing, opposition, physical and verbal aggression. Like all the things that we regularly talk about could be, pretty normal kid behaviors, especially at different developmental stages. Kids with a history of trauma, we often see an increase of what we would call frequency, intensity, and duration in the challenging behavior, in the dysregulated behavior. Right? They have like I just said, us as adults can have a decreased stress resilience system, so we're not handling stressors as well. And we've got this like mountain out of a molehill phenomenon that happens. So of course that happens with our kids, and because of their small bandwidth to just being able to tolerate normal life stressors, we see behaviors with increased frequency, intensity, and duration. Oftentimes, kids that are impacted by trauma, their challenging behaviors have a longer recovery time, and then increased what I would call secondary behaviors, like other behaviors emerge in relation to that behavior. So for example, lying is often a secondary behavior, right? Like lying emerges after stealing has happened, possibly, right? So lying, so when I mean secondary behaviors, it's like a behavior that emerges because of another challenging behavior. So because of that early stress and chaos and confusion, kids with histories of developmental trauma, attachment trauma, just feeling more unsafe than we would want developing infants and babies to feel, learn to see the world with beliefs that sound a lot like, I am not safe. Adults, parents, caregivers can't be trusted. Nobody can take care of me, so I have to take care of myself. Relationships or connection is dangerous. I have to use behaviors to get what I need because my voice doesn't have any power. I can't use my words to say, this is the problem, please help me, because I've never had the experience that when I use my words, somebody ever helps me. So I have to like really up the ante and use this huge behavior that gets people's attention. Kids with early trauma histories can have a felt sense of this stressor, this thing that's happening is going to lead to me possibly dying, which can feel really hard to keep in mind. Sometimes our kids react with these enormous behaviors like physical aggression. And you're like, well, this doesn't even make sense. Like, why do I have a physically aggressive kid when all I said was, dinner's in 10 minutes instead of dinner's right now, right? Like it's the small stressor that erupts into this huge, huge, huge behavior that suggests this child is afraid for their life, because that's what physical aggression means. So how do we make sense of that? Well, for tiny babies, having, stress and chaos and not having their needs tended to could have encoded into their nervous system this very real sense of, I might die, because that's what it means to be a baby and not have your needs immediately tended to. So now we have a teenager who's like, we could say logically, this child can wait 10 minutes to eat. They're not going to die by waiting 10 minutes to eat. And we can know that in our thinking brains, and our kids can even know that in their thinking brains, but they're feeling, their body might be remembering these early sensations where something not being right did have this felt sense of, I might die and I must meet my own needs. I can't trust other people to do it. Nobody comes and helps me. I have to figure out a way to do it myself. So all these kind of negative, or what we're going to call today, these like scared child beliefs, don't only happen, of course, in the moment of like obvious kind of trauma behavior or dysregulation, right? They almost create this like lens by which we see the world always. A lens to the point where we don't even realize that we have lenses on, right? Like if I always saw the world through green lenses, like totally green, covered everything. I never in my whole life ever saw the world anything but that. I wouldn't even know I had a lens on, right? I would just think that that was normal, but it would in fact be coloring the way I see everything and the way I experience things and the way I interpret things. And this is true for kids with a history of trauma, that it just changes how they interpret things and they experience the world as not safe. So they're interpreting your expressions as not safe, questions as not safe, requests as unsafe, gestures, being asked to do a chore. Like there's so much that the rest of us are like, what are you talking about? This is just normal, like life. Like we have to do chores, right? Or, sometimes I do feel disappointed when like this is just normal life. But for our kids with trauma histories, being requested to do something or seeing a look of disappointment on somebody's face because of the lens in which they're seeing the world could feel very catastrophic to them, could feel like this is an extremely dangerous or this is a very life-threatening experience. So these beliefs then about the way like the world works and then the way that the brain is shaped in this environment of fear and predictability, this is what sends this trauma tornado into motion. These beliefs about the way the world works. And what we end up with is this cycle that is so hard to get out of, where we have a scared child who acts scary and a scared parent who acts scary. Now, the first time I was introduced to this very specific metaphor, scared child acts scary, scared parent acts scary, was from the first mentors. Well, let's say one of the first mentors I had in this field. So a long time ago, the Attachment and Trauma Center of Nebraska, and they're amazing. They do amazing work. They've published a fantastic book for clinicians, a fantastic book for parents. So if you aren't familiar with the work of the Attachment and Trauma Center of Nebraska, kind of, just bookmark this in your mind and go and check out the amazing work that they do, because this is their metaphor. Scared child acts scary, scared parent acts scary. And we're going to, because you might be like, what does this mean? So don't worry. I know it's a little bit like, what does this mean? And I'm going to make it so clear what this means. And then this cycle becomes so hard to jump out of. And that to me is what feels like the sensation of this tornado, where it just like picks up and it keeps going and going and going and going and going and going. And all of a sudden we're just surrounded by chaos and we have no idea what to do. Negative behaviors with our kids begin with the scared child. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead. I'm not a very black and white person. I'm real open to like nuance, but I'm going to go ahead and say that this is an always thing. Negative behaviors always begin with a scared child. It might not look scared, right? You might have a child that you're like, that child's not scared. That child is oppositional. That child doesn't even care, right? I get it. I know those behaviors. I totally get it. But their brain really has only two settings, a connection setting and a protection setting, connection mode and protection mode. And protection mode in the brain is always driven by fear. Something that has the potential to be dangerous flips the brain into what we call protection mode. And these negative behaviors emerge from protection mode. Now, how do you know this? Ask yourself, is this a behavior in which the child is clearly inviting me into connection with them, and or I want to be in connection with this child because of the behavior? And if the answer is no, which lying typically is no, that's a big behavior that's emerging from the protective mode of the brain. Okay, so let's look at this kind of globally first and look at behaviors more than just lying. And then we're going to narrow down and get really focused on lying. But I want you to see how this paradigm, this approach can apply to all behaviors. So the scared child belief that's always underneath lying, always, is it's not safe to tell the truth. Now, we might have to redefine what safe means. It could mean physically safe. It could be relationally safe. Be a lot of different things that, safety is. Safety isn't only about being physically safe, but we only lie. And if we got real honest with ourselves and asked ourselves, when was the last time we lied? Then we would see that underneath it, we lied because it felt vulnerable not to. It felt like the potential for something to bad happen. There was a potential for something to bad happen if we didn't lie about that thing. And the same is true for everyone. Now, the thing with kids with trauma histories is that because of the early chaos and confusion, and because of that lens where they've got this lens where they see things as dangerous when it really isn't dangerous, they're feeling like something is scary or it's not safe to tell the truth, even though the rest of us are objectively going like, what are you talking about? Why could this not be safe? I don't understand. Or how many times have I worked with adoptive parents who are like we are rock star, like connection-based parenting. We don't use punishment. Like our kid has never been like overtly or harshly punished. Like, why are they afraid of getting in trouble? Right. And it's because we got to get deeper than that, because getting in trouble means a potential loss of connection. Getting in trouble potentially means, even though you've never been violent towards me before, that doesn't mean you never will be, because what I know about adults is that they're violent when they're angry. Or, the risk could be you're going to get mad at me enough that you send me away and you don't love me anymore. Like the risks can be huge. Okay. Stealing is about, how wants or needs, and I can't trust other people to meet my needs. And because of what happens in the brain with early trauma, that is very common for kids with trauma histories to really conflate needs and wants. Like something you and I would say, like, that's a want. That child doesn't need that new toy from Walmart. It can feel, the desire to have something can feel like a need, even though whatever it is, this thing that they quote unquote need is truly, honestly not a need. It feels like one. And if we remember that, then it makes a lot more sense why they react the way they react, because the rest of us really freak out when we're not getting a need met too, right? And sometimes steal to get that need met. Food, behaviors around food can be driven by, I don't know when I'm going to get to eat again, or I can't trust adults to meet my needs, or maybe even I will die. Violence is about, I'm in danger, I have no voice, I have no power. Again, I will die, because we only respond with violence when we feel like our life is being threatened. Again, we could objectively be saying that doesn't make any sense, but it's about the felt experience of the child that is being colored through, filtered through their lens. Opposition and defiance. I don't trust adults. I must be in control to be safe. I don't have a voice. I don't have any power. Manipulation and control. I can't use my voice to get my needs in that. I must be in control to be safe. So we could do whole webinars on each of these different behaviors. I just wanted to show you how this paradigm can be, we can fit almost any behavior you're thinking about through the paradigm that we're going to put lying through in the next hour that we spend together. So let's again just pull back for a second and remember, regulated, connected kids who feel safe and of course know what to do well. They're behaving well. Right? Our brains are designed to keep us in close connection. Our brains are designed to keep us as part of the pack, right? And this is especially true of children. Like human children are vulnerable and dependent upon the adults, on the mature part of, people in our species much longer than other mammals. Connection is literally vital to keep us alive. So I like to really remember that when I'm faced with a really baffling or frankly, just really annoying behavior or a behavior that's making me really irritated or mad. I like to try to go, okay, but why? Because humans need to be in connection for our brains to develop, for us to feel safe. We know this really clearly by neuroscience. This is really clear with everything we understand about neuroscience these days. And kids especially need adults to keep them safe. So why is this child behaving in a way that isn't making me want to be with them? That's a place, if we can, to have a lot of curiosity. The brain is actually scanning the environment, the people that we're with, and our own internal experience for cues of safety or cues of danger 4 times every second. Not every 4 seconds, 4 times every second. Every quarter of a second, the brain is scanning for danger. Now, this is about all brains, y'all. This is not about kids with trauma histories. This is about your brain and my brain, and human brains are scanning for danger at least 4 times every second. Now, when the brain lands on something that is not safe or has the potential to be not safe, the brain shifts into what I call protection mode. And in protection mode, the objective is, well, number one, if it's mild, a mild protection mode, the objective is I need to gather more information to decide if it's really safe or not safe. I'm going to ask everybody to just double check that you're muted. I'm getting some background noise from someone.
I got it.
Thank you. Sorry. So when I have this, I've got something. I have the little strip of people's faces, the thumbnails, on the screen that's being presented. Is that covering up the slide right now? Or are you guys still seeing the slide completely? Sometimes when
I can still see the slides.
Okay, it doesn't look like a shadow or anything. Sometimes that happens. And because
No.
Zoom is a mystery, I've not been able to figure out when it happens and when it doesn't. Okay, perfect. Then I'm gonna leave that there because I like it here better. Okay, so again, this is how all brains, human brains do this 4 times every second. People with a history of trauma have a default more into protection mode. This is for a lot of reasons, but we can kind of just generalize it and to say that like, it's more efficient, right? Like if I've had life experiences that have taught me most things are dangerous, it's just more efficient for me to sort of make that my default and assume things are dangerous until given new or more information. So there's some pretty good research that shows people with histories of trauma, people with overactive, like amygdalas, limbic systems, the parts of the brain that are really scanning for threat, interpret neutral and even positive stimulus as negative or as dangerous. So we can summarize that as people with a history of trauma are more likely to default to protection mode. They're more likely to fall into the scared child place. Even though you and I are being like this doesn't make sense, there's nothing to be scared of. It's a little bit about how their brain maintains protection. They maintain protection by first assuming danger until proven otherwise. Okay, so lying, aggression, being defiant, right? These are protective brain behaviors that emerge from this place of the scared child, as identified by like my friends over at the Attachment Trauma Center in Nebraska, where they said that this starts with the scared child, and then the scared child acts scary. So from an adult's perspective, we're interpreting behaviors, lying, stealing, aggression, sexually acting out, food hoarding. We experience those behaviors as threatening to us, right? Like we get scared, we get reactive, and our protection mode brain switches on. So then we become the scared parents in the cycle. Now we might be feeling mad, but what it's being driven by is the sense of protection mode. So it's being driven by the sense of fear, scared, right? And then that causes our behaviors to be experienced as scary by the child. So if the scared child is experiencing me as the adult as scary, what happens next? The scared child remains scared, and we just stay in the cycle, right? We keep going and going and going and going and going, right? When I'm scared, I parent in a way that doesn't inspire felt safety in my child, right? Like I might be yelling or screaming or punishing or threatening or saying things I regret later. All of those kind of parent behaviors emerge from my own protective mode brain, my own kind of scared parent moments. And those are normal human things to do. It makes so much sense that parents fall into this act scary, scared parent part of the tornado. And once we're in that spot, we're not creating an experience where the child might feel something different other than scared, right? Like we just continue, unfortunately, despite our best intentions, to perpetuate this cycle. And that's when it starts to feel like this tornado. So we as the adults, as theoretically the more regulated people in the relationship, and I say theoretically because I know I'm not always the more regulated person in my relationship with my child, but I try to be, right? We must become detectives, right? We have to get really good about getting curious about what's underneath. What's the scared child belief that's underneath this behavior? And then we want to respond to that. So what this often looks like is that we're not responding to the behavior that we see. We're going to respond to what's under the behavior, what's driving the behavior. Now, it would be awesome if our kids would come to us like this: Mom, I'm scared that if I don't have a snack this very second, that I am actually going to starve to death. And I know that that's not possible because I know we have a pantry full of food and we live 5 minutes from the grocery store. But there is still a sensation in my body that happens when I am not allowed to have a snack that leads me to feeling like I'm about to starve to death. Now, it would be awesome if our kids could communicate that to us, because do you know, how would you respond if your kid came to you and said this to you? Like, wow, that must be really big feeling. It must feel terrible to have such a big feeling, even though your thinking brain knows, like, of course you're not going to starve to death, but you have this huge feeling that's causing you to feel that way. Wow. Like we respond with compassion, right? But our kids don't come to us with those words. What we have to do is get really good at decoding those behaviors and kind of hearing these words instead, so that we could respond as if they had said those words. And I know that this might sound completely impossible, probably to some of you, but it actually is possible to get to a point where kids really have this kind of language. In fact, I see children with a history of trauma who have had a lot of therapeutic parenting, a lot of coaching, a lot of somebody really help them know what's happening inside of them, be able to articulate their feelings and their needs exponentially better than most adults I know. I mean, it's really pretty mind-blowing what they can become capable of if we can stay regulated enough to like help them and walk them through these things. But they mostly are using behaviors. And they do that for all sorts of reasons. They're triggered too quickly. They learned that behaviors are what actually does get their needs met. They have absolutely no idea what they're even feeling or thinking inside. And all they know is they feel bad, right? So when your kids say, I don't know why they did something, they mostly don't actually know. But they can learn. They really can learn, right? So they're doing this instead of, Mom, when I don't get a snack, right? They're not doing that. They're just screaming at us. So then it's our job to see the scared kid that's under this, and to know that the absolute only way out of this tornado is for us as the caregivers to really see that child, the scared child underneath those scary behaviors. And then we as parents, the first thing we're going to do is change our own scared parent beliefs. Number one step, and I'm going to give you steps, but the number one step is change our own scared parent beliefs. So again, before we zoom in on lying, let's look at common scared parent beliefs for a wide variety of challenging behaviors. When our kids are lying to us, sometimes we feel something like, my kid is going to be a pathological liar. Sometimes we feel like, does this kid think I'm stupid? Like we take it really personally, like you must think I'm an idiot, right? We get all sorts of really big, like scared parent beliefs around lying. Stealing can feel really humiliating to parents. Like if your kid is caught stealing, that can feel really humiliating. Like when our own boundaries are violated by stealing, that feels terrible. It feels like nothing is safe. It feels like, oh my gosh, my kid's certainly going to go to jail. My kid has no morals. They're like a sociopath, right? When our kids are struggling with food, some of our scared parent beliefs could sound like, I'm a bad mom who can't even feed my kid correctly. My kid is disgusting. I feel totally out of control. I mean, food issues is like the next thing after lying that like really gets all of our buttons for sure. Violence is we can have scared parent beliefs of like, I'm in danger. I can't keep my child safe or my other children safe. I'm not safe in my own home. My kid's going to hurt me or my other kids. Opposition and defiant can bring up thoughts of like, I'm not in control. I'm a terrible parent. This is personal behavior and a direct attack at me. Manipulation and control can be like, I can't allow my child to win. I can't allow my child to be in control. This is a personal and direct attack on me, right? So this is just a tiny little smattering. Like I kind of picked like the most common ones I've heard. But when we move into our own protective mode, and so let me distinguish between something important here. Sometimes our brain goes into protective mode because we're in danger, right? Sometimes we are actually faced with danger and our kids are doing something that's actually dangerous and we need to be in protective mode because we've got to keep everyone safe and we've got to try to stop it if possible. So sometimes if the thought I'm in danger is true, right? What I'm talking about here, like with this chart, is when those thoughts are coming up, even when the objective situation isn't warrant that, that fear or that belief. Okay, so just want to be really clear about that. So if we look at this with the example of food, right? The scared child belief is, I will starve. Like if I don't get to eat this very second, I am going to starve. Then the scared child behavior, the scary child, is that we've got this enormous tantrum. And you're like, I don't have time for this. Like I'm literally getting food on the table. I've got my hands on the stove, like my hands are full. I'm plating food and you're throwing a tantrum because you're not eating this second, right? So we have all sorts of feelings about that. And then we respond based on those feelings. Often it can be we're yelling or we're threatening or we're ignoring or we're rolling our eyes or we're minimizing their feelings. And all sorts of things can happen that make perfect sense. It makes perfect sense that we respond that way because we're getting to our own protection mode. Okay, so if we know that the only way we get out of this cycle is by adjusting the scared parent beliefs, what that could look like then is the child who still is the scared child who acts scary, still has this sense that I'm going to starve, I don't get to eat this second, then they throw a tantrum. And then you as the parent, it's a caregiver, can pause, recognize your own fear that emerges, and then go, but wait, actually what this is a scared child. And if I have a child in front of me that I am noticing, like their behavior is not okay, it's not acceptable, but it's emerging from a place of fear, that dramatically increases the chance that I'm going to be able to stay regulated enough that I can parent in a way that solves the real problem and sets an actual boundary. We'll look at what I mean by that because I'm going to give you some really clear examples about what that means. That when I can stay regulated, I can keep my X-ray vision goggles on, see underneath the behavior. I'm going to increase the chances that I can solve the real problem, meet the child's actual need, and set a boundary about the behavior if necessary. That's not always necessary, but sometimes it really is. So again, the only place that we can intervene is that scared parent moment, changing our own kind of beliefs about what we're seeing in front of us. Okay, so we're gonna go on here. I do want to just pause and check. I'm not, of course, paying attention to the chat because there's no way I could. There's so much going on in there. So Jessica or Felicia, any questions that you want me to address quickly?
We just had a couple. One person had asked if the slide deck could be shared as a PDF afterwards, or if they should expect that, or if they should take lots of notes.
So, did I not send you guys the slide, like the PDF handouts of the slides?
No, not yet.
Okay.
But we
That
can
shocks me. I'm really sorry if I didn't do that. I intended to do that like when I sent everything ahead of time. So the answer to that question is absolutely.
Perfect.
I absolutely want y'all to have the slide deck, and my apologies that you don't have it. So Jessica, if I get that to y'all, you can get it to everybody who's registered.
Absolutely. And then the follow-up
Perfect.
question was just about the statistic about the child scanning it, or about every human scanning every 4 seconds. Do you have resources at the end of the slide deck where they can find out where you got that stat from?
So that information emerges out of Dr. Steve Porges's work and the polyvagal theory.
Awesome. Great.
So I can put that. Yeah. Yep. You bet. Yep. That's all Dr. Porges's polyvagal and how we're in his concept of neuroception.
Awesome. Thank you so very much.
Yeah, totally. Okay. So there are these 4 steps to getting us out of this trauma tornado. Okay. How do we get out? There's 4 steps. Number 1, we have to regulate ourselves first. There's nothing else happens unless we first regulate ourselves. We just get better at that over time. Promise. Like the more you practice staying regulated, the more regulated you stay. And then you give yourself so much compassion when you don't, because you're a human too. Like nothing about parenting a kid with a history of trauma gives us superhuman capacity to stay regulated in the face of extremely difficult behavior. It's very hard to stay regulated with some of these behaviors. So we just practice and we just keep trying to kind of like improve the statistic upon which we're able to stay regulated. So regulate ourselves first, then see the fear beneath the behavior. Okay, then know our own scared parent beliefs. What are our vulnerabilities? Because what triggers me about lying versus what triggers somebody else about lying, triggers a different family about lying, are all different. We all have different things that touch our own internal worlds in different ways and cause different levels of our own dysregulation. And then we're going to replace that scared parent belief with the truth. Okay, so let's look at what that means. Okay, so the scared child belief in lying is it's not safe to tell the truth. This is across the board. Okay, so then we see the behavior of lying. And then maybe my scared parent belief is, does this kid think I'm stupid? Right? And how offended like we feel that you think I am dumb enough not to notice the lie. Right? Now, this is not everybody's scared parent belief about lying, but it is a very common one. I hear this one a lot, right? It could be that my child is going to grow up to be a pathological liar. They're never going to learn how to tell the truth about anything. They're going to be a pathological liar. They're never going to have sustainable relationships or be able to have a job. They're probably going to go to jail, right? So I first have a kid who's lying to me about eating a piece of cake, and my next thought is that they're going to go to jail for the rest of their life, okay? So there's this big like, whoa, okay? So notice your own scared parent kind of beliefs, and we'll tend to those. And because if we don't, we end up in this place of, right, like yelling and shaming, right? So when we feel safe with the person that we're in relationship with, we behave in more authentic ways, right? We believe that this person will love us no matter what, right? We believe that they're never going to leave us. We believe that if we make a mistake, we'll be able to repair and they'll forgive us. We believe we won't be harshly punished when we make mistakes. We believe we're going to get our needs met, right? Those are beliefs of people who feel safe in relationships and have a history of feeling safe in relationships. But kids with histories of trauma often have these kinds of beliefs. I'm not worthy of unconditional love. It's conditional. I have to earn the right to be here. To not be loved means I'll be rejected and humiliated. So if I make a mistake, it's going to get worse because I'm going to then get rejected and humiliated. I could make a mistake big enough that you would leave me. And if we have a kid who's ever lost a family, if you have a kid who's in out-of-home care, adoption, foster care, there is a very real potential that an internalized belief that they have is I could be a mistake. I could make a mistake big enough that you would leave me. And if I think it's possible to make a mistake big enough that I would lose a family, that dramatically increases the likelihood that I'm going to lie about things. Mistakes mean I'll be shamed, humiliated, rejected, hurt, or left. My body could be in physical danger from you because of this mistake. I can't trust anyone but myself to get my needs met. That often leads to lying. And then wants or needs, I must get what I need. And again, that of course often leads to lying, right? Like if there's something that I believed that I needed or I would die, I would go to any cost to get it. That could include stealing, lying, manipulating, all sorts of behaviors that don't prioritize relationship and instead prioritize safety, right? Like my own personal safety. So the number one thing is regulate yourself, know your own triggers. Know, like maybe, well, let's assume that all of y'all in a lying webinar would say like, yeah, lying probably triggers me, but maybe oppositional behavior doesn't trigger you very much, but stealing really triggers you. Right? Know what your own triggers are and just own them. Like, don't feel guilty about them. Like we all have them. We're all human. We all have triggers. Know your signs of dysregulation. Know what it feels like in your body when you're starting to get stressed. I know what happens for me. My voice gets higher, it gets faster, and my body starts to clench up, right? And my legs and my thighs get really tense, right? So sometimes I can notice even before I have the thought, whoa, you're stressed. I can notice like those things, and then I can go, oh, whew, okay, take a breath, take a break if you can. See if you can release some of that tension from your body. Like how I just said, I always notice that I start to get like this. So I try to go. And then another way I think that could be helpful to regulate it yourself is just like, is there a place in my body that isn't stressed? Sometimes I'll do silly things like, what about your earlobe? Is your earlobe feeling stressed right now? And most people will be like, I'll kind of like check. No, actually, of course, and it's silly too, right? Because who feels stress in their earlobe, right? So that can be a good way of noticing what it really is doing is helping us kind of ground and get a little bit more connected to ourselves again. And then our second step is to see the fear beneath the behavior, right? So this really requires a major paradigm shift that could be bumping up against some of like our deep-seated beliefs about children and behaviors and raising children, but really believing that all negative behavior is called by fear. But negative behavior comes out of protection mode brain. And the relational neurosciences really are supporting this truth that when we're in connection mode, we have connection-based behaviors. When we're in protection mode, we have protective-based behaviors. Be curious, be a detective. Sometimes we have to do this work outside of those scared parent moments, right? Like when we're really dysregulated, it's really hard for us to keep like our detective, those X-ray vision goggles on about our kids' behavior and about our own. So we have to be reflective about it later, like really look back and be like, what happened? How did it happen? Why? I wonder what was going on. Sometimes we have to do that work later. And definitely, of course, take into consideration your specific child's specific history. Right? How did their early experiences shape their beliefs about themselves and their caregivers and the world? Because there's definitely a lot of clues there. And sometimes we have to just take the clues and do a lot of good guesses because our kids can't really tell us exactly what their own kind of scared child beliefs are, right? It would be a lot easier if they could, again, they can learn to. But typically that takes a lot of practice. And then of course, know your scared parent beliefs. Do you hear yourself things like my child would grow up to be a pathological liar? Does he think that I'm stupid? I'll never be able to trust this child. I'm a terrible parent. Just again, outside the moment of really hard, difficult behaviors, just get really honest with yourself. Like, what are the words that come up What are the words that come up in my mind that I've never even noticed because they're my own lens? It's how I've learned how to see the world, right? It's these scared parent beliefs that take us out of the here and now. That's how we go all the way to my child has eaten a cookie and is lying to me about it, and they're going to go to jail for the rest of their lives, right? Like that's clearly a thought that's taking us out of the present moment, because you really don't have to worry about in this moment when faced with a child who's taken a cookie without asking at age 5, you really don't have to in that exact moment worry about, you know, their lifelong career as a criminal, right? All you have to do is figure out like what's happening right now. So there's this like future tripping thing that happens where we leave the present and get really flooded by all this other stuff. So staying focused on, you know, knowing what your scared parent beliefs are and staying focused on what the truth really is one way to help us stay grounded in the here and now. And then we want to try to replace those scared parent beliefs with the truth. What's the real truth? What's the real problem here? Okay, the real problem here is that my kid still doesn't trust adults. And that is very frustrating to me, who has worked really hard to be able to be a trustworthy adult to this child. And the child still doesn't trust adults. And there's so much tragedy, so much grief and sadness under having a childhood that is fraught with a lack of trust for adults, a lack of felt safety. My child is always afraid that he will be abandoned or hurt. So it makes sense that lying would happen. My child's brain is so reactive that she jumps instantly into a lie, even when the truth isn't even a problem. Like how many of you are like the truth is not even a big deal. Like the truth, there's absolutely no reason to lie about that. Like I just asked a question and they made something up, even though like what the answer would have been like, oh, cool. Right. But the mere thought of a question has put the child into such reactivity and protection brain mode that they just like make something up and blurt out this bizarre lie. Right. I am a good parent. We don't have to take the behaviors personally. And for so many of us, even when our surface feeling is anger, what's a lot of the times what's underneath it are shame-based feelings of like somehow this is my fault and I'm doing this wrong. So we can replace that with I'm a good parent. I know how to handle this, or I can learn how to handle this. I have the resources that I can go and figure out how do I handle this behavior if I really don't know how to. And then I can learn how to help my child feel safe in relationship. I really can't control if they do, but I can take the steps that I'm in control of taking to help them feel safe inside relationship. Those are just some examples of taking the kind of scared parent belief and replacing it with like, well, what's actually true here? Okay, so then what? We're faced with a lie because you've done all those things. You've seen the scared child's, behave as scared child behavior. You've regulated yourselves. You've replaced your scared parent beliefs. Okay, but you still have a situation here you have to deal with. So then what do you do? Right. So the number one rule in lying: don't ask a question if you know the answer. Do not ask your child a question if you know the answer to it. Who did this? If you know, or if you're pretty darn sure. Did you eat this cake? What? They did eat the cake because it's all over them, right? Don't ask a question if you know the answer. This is a very normal human thing to do. So I see the people I can see are kind of chuckling. Yes, we're all doing this. Stop, because you're inviting your child to lie. Don't ask a question that your child has no idea what the answer is. Like, why did you do this? I know why we ask that question, because we want to know. We feel like if we could just figure out why they did this, we might be able to keep it from happening again. Yeah, that actually might be true, but your child, for the most part, has no idea why they did that, especially in the moment of getting caught, right? Especially in the moment of being in trouble. Their brain's not working well enough to be self-reflective. Be like, well, actually, I lied because I was feeling really afraid that if I told the truth, you would reject me and I'd have to find another family again. That is not going to happen. I wish it would happen, but it's not going to happen. So just don't ask. Literally reassure your child, even if you've just caught them in a lie. Say these words: you are okay with me. We can solve this problem together. Me and you, we're on the same team. I can help you. So before addressing the behavior, reassure safety. We're on the same team. You're okay with me. and name the fear for your child. It's so hard to trust that things will be okay. But everyone makes mistakes in this family. We work together to fix those mistakes. We don't hurt each other or leave each other because people make mistakes. Okay, so we're being very, very, very clear about addressing what the real problem is. And this takes a leap of faith. You're going to have to take a leap of faith that I know what I'm talking about and I'm telling you correctly what the real problem is, because your kid's not going to tell you. So you're just going to take a leap of faith. Eventually, you'll actually start to get information back from your kid that lets you know you're right, that you're on the right track. It'll be in the look of their face or the way their body changes, or they'll actually say, yes, that is how I feel. Okay, so let's look at some really specific examples here. Okay, here's the scenario. It's been 2 weeks. Your child's semester-long lunch money, it's gone, right? The card that they used for hot lunch, it's empty. And it's only 2 weeks, right? So, hey, buddy, your lunch money is already gone. Notice there is no question there, right? It's just a statement about what you know is true. Your lunch money's gone because you got an email from the school that told you. No, it's not. Lie. Well, I received a printout from the school and I can see what you bought every day, right? Again, we're just stating facts. And we're doing this with a safe, connected, curious tone of voice. I only buy lunch. I only buy what I'm supposed to, right? Well, kiddo, you're always, always okay with me no matter what. But we have a problem we have to solve together. You're out of lunch money. Do you want to work together to solve this problem now, or do you want to work together to solve it later? We'll need to talk about it soon, though, because we have to figure out what we're going to do about lunch tomorrow. Okay, so you see all the pieces in there. We're always okay. We're going to solve this together, right? This is just like, there's no trouble here, but we do have an actual problem, which is that you don't have any lunch money. We've got to figure out how to solve it. You don't have to talk about it now, but we do have a little bit of a deadline here because the lunch happens every day, right? So if this child isn't willing to problem solve, even if you delay the conversation, like even if you're like, okay, we'll talk about this later, and they still are refusing in whatever way they refuse, they could be like ignoring you, they could be yelling at you, there could be all sorts of ways kids are refusing, right? You have a child then who doesn't trust that the problem can be solved together. And so take a proactive stance to teach about this, right? Make sure you're only sending the exact amount of lunch money that they need every day. If your kid can't regulate through having a semester's worth of lunch money, then and they are not willing to participate in problem solving, then the boundary that we set is that the child only has access to the exact amount of lunch money that they need every single day. Or we're switching to bag lunches. And again, this isn't a punishment. This is about recognizing that your child needs more support to be successful. They can't have access to that much money. It's too much, it's too tempting. They don't have the regulatory capacity to regulate through only spending, $5 a day to get through the whole semester. This is simply about capacity and skill. So if we switch to bag lunches, we're making sure that we're not doing it as a punishment, right? And that we're not looking for ways even to make it a subtle punishment, like sending them food that they don't really like, right? And then we're going to make sure that we stay really, really curious about why they spent all their lunch money, right? Because so far we've only solved a part of the problem, right? We still like, why did 2 weeks go by and they spent, I don't know how much a semester's worth of lunch money is, but it's a lot, right? Like way more than you should spend in 2 weeks. And y'all, I have had kids blow all their lunch money in 2 weeks, and I'll bet some of you have too. When I lived in Austin, the schools weren't allowed to do anything that regulated how much kids spent every day. And they also weren't allowed to not give kids a lunch if they didn't have money on their lunch card. So kids were still like, not only were they spending all their lunch money, but they were like going into like debt because the school legally wasn't allowed to say no. So this clearly created some problems. So why is this happening? Like why is your kid getting that much food at lunch? Are they hoarding the food? Are they giving it away so that they'll make friends? Right? We have to look at what the real problem is. The lying isn't what the real problem was. There's something underneath the lie, and we want to get to that. by staying focused on the real problem and helping your child solve that, you're proving up to them that you're a safe person who can see them for who they really are, a kid who's struggling and needs help, right? So that is also, you know, putting deposits in the felt safety bank when you help to kind of solve that real problem together. Sometimes kids are leading with this, you know, this scared child belief of, if I tell the truth, I won't get what I need and or want. And we're remembering that stressed out brains and kids with trauma histories often kind of conflate the two, and something that feels like a want to us feels like a need to them. So we want to keep our detective hat on, stay really curious about underlying the need, whenever possible, meet the need, or teach your child how to negotiate getting their need met in a little bit more appropriate way. So let's look at an example of that. Simply because somebody's using a negative behavior to get the need met doesn't mean we shouldn't meet their need. And oftentimes we get so like kind of tangled in knots at the behavior that was used that we lose sight of like, well, the thing that they were trying to get though is completely reasonable. So let's help them get that, right? So lying to get what I need or want might look something like this. I don't have any homework today, when you know that your child actually really does have homework. So the lying to get what I want is, I want to play video games and not do my homework, or whatever, right? I want to not do my homework. I don't have homework today. So first, stay curious. What's the need? Is the homework too hard? Is your child afraid of missing out on something else? Are they just tired because their brain has been working hard all day at school and they really just don't even want to do homework? I mean, that's a pretty legit need, to be honest with you, right? So we got to remember, again, that mantra, regulated, connected kids who feel safe, behave well. And so the answer to this question, I don't have, you know, why is your child saying I don't have homework today, is never something like, well, they're just lazy. Okay, maybe, but why? What's underneath that? Because humans are designed to be like really curious and explorative and to like be their best selves. So if your kid is being lazy, the question is, but why? There can be all sorts of reasons that come into that really don't even have anything to do with trauma. And they could be completely reasonable reasons. My point is, we want to get super curious about it. Okay, so your child is saying, I don't have homework. You know they do. So here's a response. Hey, buddy, I can see that you have math homework tonight. No, I don't. Well, I got an email today from Schoology, and it says that you do. I wonder what's up with that. Right, so again, we're not asking questions or telling kids to explain themselves or like accusing them of lying. We're just stating the facts. And this is like, tone is really important here, right? Like, well, I got an email from Schoology today and it says you do. So right? No, that's very different than, well, I got an email from Schoology today and it says you do have homework today. So I'm wondering what's up with that. I have no idea. Schoology is just wrong, I guess. Maybe my teacher messed something up. You know, how many times have my kids' problems been because the teacher is an idiot and that teacher has screwed something up? A lot. I mean, not in real life, but according to my child, right? It's all the teacher's fault. Well, teachers are human and they make mistakes, but not at that level of frequency is my guess. So I might say something like, well, that's possible. Technology sometimes does mess up and teachers sometimes make mistakes. And that really does happen. Like sometimes my kids' teachers are terrible at entering things in a timely fashion. And so it looks like he has 12 missing assignments when he doesn't, right? And so we do have to really be open to the fact that actually maybe our kid isn't lying. But so, well, that's possible. Technology sometimes messes up. Do you want me to email the teacher? Or do you want to email the teacher and CC me on it? Or do you want me to email them? You have two options. How are we going to solve this problem together? All right, so but maybe your kid digs in their heels and just won't change the lie. All right, so first and foremost, always remember the trauma tornado. Resist the urge to making sweeping character judgments, because it's really easy to do all the steps that I just said. Let's not say really easy. It's easier to do all the steps that I just said, cross your fingers and hope that by some magical reason, I have solved all of your problems and just that one little script is going to prevent your child from ever lying again. And now they're wonderfully compliant kids, right? Like we're hoping. And then that doesn't happen and you do the script and then your child's like, I don't have math homework, right? And you're like, this didn't work. It's my child's just, see, that in other words, my child's just a liar. It's super easy to jump to that. So just notice that that's easy because you're human, right? Take a break, right? So maybe something like, all right, well, it sounds like we're not going to reach a solution here together right now. Together, let's take a break and talk about this again in about 15 minutes. And then you have to follow up. Okay, it can't linger. Consider following up or communicating in written form, maybe sending your kid a text, an email, writing a note, taping it on their door, slipping it under their door, something like that. Depends on how old your kid is. Don't get accusatory or confrontational, right? That's just us jumping back in the tornado, right? You did all this great work of staying curious and open, and then you jump in, that is going to happen. So again, that's going to happen because you're as human as the rest of us. But just try, when they continue to refuse to engage, try to still stay out of accusations, stay out of being confrontational, stay out of like perpetuating this, chaotic cycle. Remember that ultimately you can't force your child to do anything, absolutely nothing. We were sold a lie as parents that we have control over our children. We do not have control over anybody except ourselves. When it comes right down to it, I can't make my kid do anything, including their homework or admitting something, right? It's just, I can't. So sometimes I just have to let that go. There comes a point where it's like, I just can't. It's time to move on, right? It is okay, of course, always to set a really clear boundary, right? So that could sound like, well, remember, the rule is there's no screen time today or on the weekend if there's any outstanding assignments. So since Schoology says you have outstanding assignments, I either need you to get written confirmation from your teacher that Schoology is wrong, or I need you to get those assignments in. It doesn't matter to me which one you choose. Let me know if you need any help with that. And then y'all, if this is an ongoing problem, like if you're having this discussion with your kid every single day and they're lying about homework every single day and blaming it on their teacher, there's a bigger problem here. This has nothing to do with lying. This has something to do with the fact that your child has expectations on them that they cannot meet, and they need help with that somehow. And I don't know what that is, but somehow they need help being able to meet this expectation.
Hey, Robyn,
all right, how about just, yes, please do.
Questions from the chat?
Yep.
Awesome. So some are about larger systems things, so I will save those for the end if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Speaking specifically towards lying, I had some parents ask, I really enjoyed this question. What ideas do you have to help a child who's lying to protect or cover for a sibling? Practically, and kind of, what do you do as a caregiver in that situation?
Well, if you're positive that they're lying, right? I would kind of go with the adage of, ignore the lie, but not the child. And I'd probably just be really clear. I know that you're not telling me the truth. And I know that you're really wanting to protect your sibling. That makes a lot of sense to me, that you would want to try to keep your sister safe. And that, like, I would just label it and name it and then move on. There's no point in engaging in that or trying to come to some new conclusion or anything like that. But I do think it's 100% fine for kids to know, like, we know you're not telling the truth. It makes sense to me why you're not telling the truth.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great advice. And then I had another question that was about just age ranges, like with older teens, like keeping boundaries as well as keeping children safe, and kind of how texting plays into that too, like not texting a child when they're escalated. So the question was specifically, what are appropriate ways that I could influence this teen and keep this teen safe when it comes to lying behaviors?
I'm really sorry, but I'm really just not totally clear what the question, like, I'm not sure how to answer that question.
I'm sure there's a lot more.
When did it emerge? That sometimes helps. Sometimes I miss the context about, like, oh, that question popped up when I said X.
It was specifically for, I have a daughter from out of state. What are appropriate ways I can influence her and keep safe boundaries I didn't know any of this information when I first started parenting her.
Mhm.
So I think that one might need some more context.
Yeah, I feel like I either need some more context under the specificity of it, or that's just a really, really big question about how do I create felt safety for a child, but still have a lot of boundaries for them, which unfortunately I think just goes past the scope of what we're addressing here. Or I just don't understand the context, which would be if that person wants to add in a little bit more information. I'll totally try.
Awesome. And
I
then,
have,
oh, go ahead, Robyn.
what was I say? I have like about 2 more slides. Do you want me to keep
Perfect.
going? And then we can, okay, 2 or 3 maybe. Okay. So let's talk about 2 more things. And then we got started a little bit late and I'm comfortable staying a little bit longer to if other, to do a little bit of Q&A if that's possible. But let's talk for one, because I know this question comes up a ton, like these ridiculous lies. Like you're lying. Why are you lying? This is absurd, right? So this is always my favorite example with the child's got like covered in blue frosting and you say like, hey buddy, let's wipe all that blue frosting off your mouth. It looks like you've had one of those cupcakes. Right? So you're not saying, you're lying, you ate something you shouldn't have. It's just like, whoa, there's a problem here, covered in blue frosting. You know, looks like you've had one of those cupcakes. No, I didn't. Oh, well, we've got to get this blue frosting like cleaned up. Next time, I'll make sure that you don't feel so tempted and by having easy access to sweet treats. Now, y'all, this is an extremely regulated parent who can deliver a sentence like that without being a jerk, right? Like I'm saying this honestly, being a parent myself. So you have to really mean that. It's not, that can't be a manipulative thing to say like, well, fine, next time I'll just make sure I don't leave cupcakes out there too, you know, like you have to really mean it. Like you have to really know that like, it wasn't actually fair to leave cupcakes out in front of a child who has very little regulation. Right? It really wasn't fair to leave them unsupervised in front of, you know, with that cupcake if the rule is you're not allowed to eat it. We really set a kid up to fail. And so that's a parent thing that has to get addressed. Right? And then maybe your child still says, I didn't eat the cupcake. And that can be like, you really don't want me to know that you ate the cupcake. And I totally get it. There's no trouble here. I won't leave tempting snacks out in the future. That wasn't fair. If there's something that I don't want you to do because it's not safe for your body, like eat 12 cupcakes, it's my job as a parent to make sure that those, we don't have them or they're put away or whatever, right? And then one last thing about lying is this concept of confabulation. Now I'm going to give you the fact that the word confabulation exists. And then if you're like, oh, I think that might apply to my kid, you can go Google it and find other resources for this concept of confabulation. But confabulation is a totally normal behavior that all of us engage in when we have gaps in our memory, because memory is imperfect. Memory is especially imperfect for kids with trauma histories, kids with brain-based differences, kids with prenatal exposure, kids with traumatic brain injuries, things like that. But our brain really, really, really wants things to make sense. And so sometimes it just makes up a story and fills in the blanks, even if it's not accurate at all. So sometimes you find yourself like, you want to call something a lie, but also that doesn't totally feel like it fits. It's like the story that you know isn't true. And if this feels like describes your kids lying, you know, when we're done, go Google confabulation. There's some good resources out there specifically for parents of kids with trauma histories about confabulation. And just this like narrative making up thing that kids can do. Well, frankly, we can all do it. So when we think we're engaged with confabulation and we want to make sure we stay calm ourselves, know in your own mind that it's confabulation that tends to help us stay more regulated and out of the kind of indignant response we often have to getting lied to. That sounds like an interesting story, or that's an interesting story, or I never even knew that. And you can ask yourself, is it really important for me to correct this information? Like, is it necessary that I correct this information that the child's telling me that I know is not true? And if it is necessary, is it necessary that you do it now? So that's the 60-second version of confabulation. There's a lot out there if you think that resonates with you. So I will do the last just wrap up slides, and then I'll come out of share screen mode. And then Jessica, if there's more questions, we can look at them. So here's my summary. Calm yourself first. See the scared child. Right? Identify this as scared child behavior. Identify your own scared parent beliefs. Replace them with what the truth is. And then meet the child's real need. What was driving that behavior? Meet the need. Ensure them that there's no trouble. There's no trouble here. And then meet whatever the real need is. And you may be asking yourself, but what about the consequence for the lying? Okay, so then let's go back to the idea that regulated, connected kids who feel safe behave well. We really don't need to give a punishment to lying. And in fact, that almost always decreases connection and decreases felt safety, which ultimately increases the problem behavior. Okay, so we have to trust that if we can meet the real need, we can tend to the fear that's underneath, then the lying behavior will trickle away, because there will be the sense of, I can tell the truth, I can ask for help, I can let the grownups know when I need something, and they might not give me exactly what I want, but they're going to stay on my team and they're going to help me. So just a few places, just so this is up on the screen, I'm so sorry that these slides haven't made it to you already. So you'll absolutely get those because there's a lot of words, especially on those script slides, and I want you to have them. And then come and find me, on the internet. I have tons of resources out there. If you haven't discovered them already, I would love to kind of have you in my sphere, the place where I hang out on the internet. I have several free video resources on my website. Actually what I like to recommend in this particular webinar when I talk about lying is there's a webinar on my website under the free resources page called Dear Adoptive Parents, How I Needed You. And it's a webinar I did with an adult adopted colleague of mine. She's an author, and she writes and talks a lot about the adoption experience. And even though we weren't planning to talk about lying specifically, we do talk about lying in that video. And I think her perspective as an adult adopted person and what would have been helpful to her if her parents had responded to her lying in a different way has been really invaluable to most of the adoptive parents that I have known and worked with. So that's on my free resources page. It's really obvious what it is. It's called Dear Adoptive Parents. You'll find it easily. And then like Jessica said at the beginning, I have a blog and a podcast that you can find like anywhere and everywhere.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Just for a few of the wrap-up questions, there are some that I skipped over earlier. One is about distinguishing between trauma and other behaviors, like how, as a parent navigating that, where is this coming from? So it says, does the fear of starving to death happen to all children or just children with a history of trauma? And then they go on to talk about their child. They don't believe that she's had trauma in her life, but she gets pretty upset and always asks for a snack, even if they say no.
That's a great question. So that food is just so complex because we learn within like moments of being born that food helps us feel better, right? Like food is immediately paired with soothing, like the moment we like burst into the world. So I absolutely have worked with children and adults who don't have like this really obvious overt like trauma history, especially related to food, but can still have a lot come up around food. And then therefore, then the secondary behavior of lying can often emerge from it. It's very common for all humans to turn to food and to feel like I need food right now. This is just really complex. It's chemical, it's the way we're nurtured, that food is an immediate thing we turn to when we're dysregulated and want to feel better.
Awesome, thank you. We had a follow-up question as well about how do we explain or work with other adults, teachers, for example, to understand that even though the child is safe in the school setting, they might not feel safe and they might display these behaviors mentioned.
Yeah, that's also really good question. I mean, all questions are good. It was just such a common question. It's partly why I've worked so hard to get so many resources up for free on my website. So I do have something specific for teachers on the on my free resources page. There's like 8 or something different free downloads. One of them is a resource very specific to teachers. The master class that I have that's called What Behaviors Are and How to Change Them, What Behavior Is and How to Change It, is also a really great overview to basically what felt safety is and how people can be safe and not feel safe. And then I know I have both podcasts and blogs specific to felt safety. So when working with schools, I always suggest being really clear to the teacher or the administrator, whoever you're talking to, that you're on the same team, is that you have the same goals that they do, is that you want your child to be successful at school and learn. Okay, we're on the same page here. We both want the same thing for my child. I know some things about my child and their brain that is preventing them from being able to, achieve your goal, which is that they behave appropriately and learn at school. I get that that's why you want them to, that's your job. Are you open to some resources I could provide you that might help you understand a little bit more like what's going on for my child, so that we could support them together, me and you, in your classroom, and they could eventually show up to class and be in a place where they're able to learn and meet your behavioral expectations? So there's all these ways, right, that we're just continually saying we have the same goal. I want my child to be successful at school too. I have a lot of, hey, Lori, I have a lot of ways that I can support you in that. Are you interested in them? And then if they say no, that's a call to the next person in the chain of command.
Awesome. Thank you so very much for answering that question. And then and I think that applies really well to the one that was asked right after it. They were asking about, as a professional, or I feel like this could be applied to as a co-parent, how do you help and assist other adults to change their behavior to best meet the needs of children? So I think those resources are great for sharing with them.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the $1 billion question, right? I mean, I actually really, this will sound like a bananas thing to say, but I actually really mean this. I really believe that those of you who are here today, those of you who have a stake in caring for kids with a history of trauma, like, we are the ones who are changing the world. It's our job. We're doing it for our kids. And therefore, we are now going to be getting this information out to everyone, because some people really just need the information. They don't have it. But some people have a lot of blocks to why it's hard for them to receive the information, right? And we are world changers by getting this information out there, giving it to people and doing it. And there is a dance to connecting with people who are resistant of, again, always just assuming that you have the same goal in mind and telling them that I have the same, because, other people get afraid, like teachers get afraid that you're the parent who doesn't want your kid to take any responsibility for their behaviors, and nothing will happen, and they'll always have this big mess in the classroom. Like, that's where the teacher's brain goes. So by assuring them, like, we are on the same page, I want the same thing you do. Can I help you with that? And I do think, just like Jessica said, applying that to all the other people in your life is a good approach. And sometimes we just have to cut our, realize, like, I've done the best I could here. I've given people as much as I can. Now it's kind of up to them to decide what they're going to do with it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Robyn, for being on here today. I really appreciate your time. And I'm going to share a screen real quick for some more information for everyone afterwards to follow up. We will share those slides out for everyone. And if you do have any more questions, please email them to Foster Kent Kids, as well as visit our website. And again, we'll send out the contact information for Robyn's websites and podcasts. And if you did ask a question that we did not have time to answer, I do apologize, but please do not hesitate to try and contact in the future if you would like for follow-up on that. And Robyn mentioned some of her groups as well that can be super beneficial. Yeah, so thank you so much, Robyn, and thank you to everyone who is a foster parent, an adoptive parent, and professional in the field for attending today.
Thanks, y'all. It was awesome to see so many people here today. Thank you, all of you who just are doing what you're doing for kids. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.